we have an interesting subject matter today. And so first of all, I'm going to give you some background on what's going on. I think most of you already know this background, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. And then we're going to listen to one of the probably most precious promise that we've been given by Jesus. You know, we learned about, we've been studying we've been in chapter 10 forever, and we've been studying most recently an episode during the Feast of Tabernacles. And of course, we've been studying this since like chapter 6 or something. This Feast of Tabernacles thing has been going on for quite a while, because John is basing his gospel around these Jewish feasts. And at this Feast of Tabernacles, you remember, Jesus healed this man born blind, and then we learned about all this teaching that Jesus developed from that miracle. Now, verses 19 to 31 of John, chapter 10, tell us the reaction of the people to Jesus. 19 to 21, this is the reaction. It says, "Again, a division took place among the Jews because of these words," these teachings that Jesus had been saying. "Many of them were saying, 'He has a demon and he's crazy. Why listen to him?' Others were saying, 'Well, these aren't the words of someone demon-possessed. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?'" So you can see there was quite a division. And the people continue to be divided over Jesus in our passage today, because the miraculous acts that Jesus were doing, clearly they had some source beyond human, because human couldn't do these things. So the people were trying to figure out, where did Jesus get this power? And of course, some of them thought it was all tricks. Some of them thought it was from Satan. That was what the religious leaders were teaching, that Jesus got these powers from Satan. So the next section that we're going to study here, you can see there's quite a division right here. This takes place a couple months later. It's in December, and it's when Jesus comes back to Jerusalem. Apparently he had gone off someplace, maybe around Judea or whatever. We don't know, it doesn't say. But now he's apparently come back to Jerusalem for the Feast of Dedication, that next feast. Verse 22, "Then the festival of dedication took place in Jerusalem, and it was winter." Now we need to know about this I keep saying feast, it's actually festival of dedication, and how Jesus was fulfilling it. Because that's why John put it in here, because Jesus fulfilled it. Unlike the other feasts of the Jews, this one wasn't from the Bible. It wasn't mandated in Leviticus or anywhere. It had its basis hundreds of years later, between when our testaments were written, in that period of time. And it's in the Catholic Bible and in the Revised Standard Version, New Revised Standard Version. Some of them put what's called the Apocrypha in between our testaments. And this is one of the books in that Apocrypha. It's First Maccabees. And it tells the story of a time that was probably the worst in Jewish history. And the greatest ordeal and the greatest hero they had, besides Moses and maybe Gideon, I'm not so sure. But it was one of great heroism. It's about this king of Syria named Antiochus Epiphanes. He ruled from 175 BC to 164 BC. And Antiochus Epiphanes was Syrian, but he loved Greek culture. He thought all the world should be worshiping Greek gods and should do what the Greeks do because they knew how to do it. I'm not so sure that he really believed in democracy. Maybe he just kind of set that part aside, but the rest of Greek culture he was in love with. But he hated Jewish religion. And he wanted the Jews to become Greeks and to espouse the Greek culture. And so he, at first, was very kind to them and just tried to do it kind of like American culture is infiltrating the whole world, except he didn't have TV and internet. But that's what he's trying to do, getting people to be Greek. And some of the Jewish people embraced this and loved it, and the philosophy and the religion and the gods. They enjoyed these things. Some of the Jews did, but most of them resisted it and wanted to remain loyal to Almighty God, just as hopefully we would. Well, in 170 BC, Antiochus got fed up with these Jews, and I think there was some other incentive. He had lost another war, as I recall. And he came back through Jerusalem full of rage and decided he's going to get rid of these Jews one way or the other. So he attacked them. 80,000 Jews died, and that many more were sold into slavery. He stole 1,800 talents from the temple. Now I had to look up how much is a talent worth. And it's the weight of a man in gold. So that's a lot of gold that they had in the temple. And he stole all this, 1,800 talents of gold stolen from the temple. And it was the death penalty to even possess a copy of the Torah or to circumcise your child. And a woman who had her baby circumcised would be murdered. What do you say? They would be crucified with their dead baby hanging around their neck. That's what Antiochus Epiphanes did. He profaned the temple courts. He turned the temple chambers into brothels. He turned the great altar of the burnt offering into an altar to the Olympian god Zeus. And he offered swine flesh to the pagan gods on the altar. So you can imagine what all this did to the Jews. They needed a hero, and they got one. The Lord provided Judas Maccabeus and his brother. And the story in 1st and 2nd Maccabees tells their story. And it was an epic battle. And against all the odds, in 164 BC, they won the war. And they were able to purify the temple. And this feast of dedication remembers the joyful rededication of the temple. So you can imagine how important this was to the Jewish people. And that continues today. It was also called the Festival of Lights. And they had great lights in the temple. And apparently one of the legends is that they had this little bit of oil, and the oil didn't run out as it just kept going. It's kind of like the story of Elijah and the woman who had the oil that didn't run out. So that was the same kind of story. And today, in the window of every Jewish house, lights were set, and still are set, and it's called Hanukkah. And it coincides with our Christmas. And so when you see people wanting to have Hanukkah celebrations, you can celebrate with them because they're celebrating this great return back to God way back before Christ. So, now, Jesus has come to the festival of dedication, and he's walking in the temple courts, verse 23, in Solomon's colonnade. All right, what's all this about? Well, it gets cold in Jerusalem in December, as you might expect, and people would shelter in this colonnade on the east of the temple grounds and out of the wind and rain over there, and so Jesus was over there too. It's also possible that John included this because he likes symbols. He's using symbols all the time. And the symbol of it was winter, it sounds bleak, and it could reflect the attitude of the religious leaders at the time around Jesus and what he was saying. It was winter. Verse 24, then the Jews surrounded him. Now this one reminded me of an occasion in high school that I experienced. I had some friends that for some reason turned into my enemies and decided they were going to persecute me, and they put me in the trunk of a car, drove me to a rural area, and when they got me out, they took me out of the trunk and surrounded me in a threatening manner. I don't know what they thought they were going to do, and I don't remember that anything ever really happened. But it was pretty intimidating, I want to tell you. And that's what these religious leaders are doing to Jesus. They surround him in a threatening manner. They're not going to let him escape this time. He is going to answer their questions. It's pretty spooky. And they asked, still in verse 24, how long are you going to keep us in suspense? Now, this is interesting. Again, if you look at other translations, it can be translated a whole bunch of different ways. Another way to translate it is, how long are you going to annoy us? And the most interesting one to me was, how long are you going to take away our lives? The word, I guess, actually is lift up or to remove. So how long are you going to take away our lives? It's like when Caiaphas, you remember when Jesus was at the trial, the Sanhedrin gave him, and when they were preparing for this thing, Caiaphas told the others that it's important that one man die for the nation. You remember that? He thought that the teachings of Jesus would destroy the Jewish religion and their nation. And that's pretty much what these people are asking Jesus. How long are you going to do this? Because you're going to destroy our religion and our nation. They understood what Jesus' teaching meant for them. They thought it would be the end. They needed something. They needed to get him to say something that they could use against him, to get him in serious trouble. So they say, verse 24 at the end there, if you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. Verse 25, and he says, I did tell you, and you don't believe. Jesus answered them, the works that I do in my Father's name testify about me. Now, this is the same kind of, this is really a repetition of when he was there before at the Feast of Tabernacles. They've picked up the same thing when he got back. They're still on him about this. Jesus told him his works would speak to who he was, because nobody has this power except God. And he's been telling them who he is by using Jewish symbols from their scriptures that they all understood, but the Romans don't understand. Kind of Jewish code, you know. They understood him well enough. They knew what he was claiming. I mean, why would they have tried to stone him already if they didn't understand what he was saying? Come on. You hear people say Jesus never claimed to be God. That's why they wanted to stone him. They knew what he was talking about. What they wanted him to do was use that word Messiah. They wanted him to say, I'm the Messiah, because the Romans understood what that meant. And that would be the end of him. And he resisted using that title until it was time for him to be crucified. And then he straight out said it, because it was time, and then he was crucified. He said, the high priest said, by the Lord God Almighty, whatever, who are you? And he says, tell us if you are the Christ. And he says, I am the Christ, and you will see me in heaven, the angels descending and descending and so on. I am the Christ, he said. That was the end of it. Because then they could take him to the Romans and say he has set himself up as the king of the Jews against Rome. And so then Rome would crucify him. They knew what they were doing. They wanted him to do it now, but it wasn't his time yet. In verse 26, but you don't believe because you're not my sheep, he says. Now, this is another interesting thing, and I've read you this whole passage from Ezekiel 34 some time ago. I checked. I wasn't going to read it to you again. It's what they read during this festival of dedication, and it's God just railing on them about being poor shepherds and feeding on the people rather than helping the people, exploiting the people. And that's what the religious leaders read during this festival of dedication. It exposed the hard questions, this festival. The leadership, why are you exploiting the people? Where are the true shepherds? That's what happens during this feast, this festival. So in that passage, John is condemning the shepherds, just like Jesus is doing right now. And Jesus is going to be fulfilling the prophecy of being that shepherd. In that passage, God says he's going to be the shepherd instead of all these people who are exploiting the people. He's going to do it himself. Jesus says, I am that shepherd. Isn't that interesting how John has put that together? So Jesus has repeated again what he had said back in the fall. So then he goes on in verse 27, repeating again what he'd said back then. My sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. Verse 28, I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, ever. This is one of those double negatives again that's for emphasis. So then the question is, why will his sheep never, ever, no never, not in a million years, perish? It's because, and he gives the reason, he says, because no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all. No one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. And then he obliges the religious rulers by speaking plainly, in such a way that they'd understand plainly. He adds what a Roman soldier wouldn't understand, and it would mean nothing to him, and it wouldn't feel threatening to the Romans, but to a Jew would plainly be making the ultimate claim. And what he says is the first major climax that John has put in this book. It's what John has been building up to all this time. In verse 30, Jesus declares, "The Father and I are one." This is stronger than what he said back in John 6, where he said he had come down from heaven. It's stronger than what he said in John 8, when he said he existed before Abraham lived. I and the Father are one. He gave him more than they asked for. They were looking for a great leader who would liberate them from Rome, and he gave them more than a great leader. He gave them more than the Messiah. He claimed to be God. So verse 31. Again, the Jews picked up rocks to stone him. Now where were they? They were all in this paved colonnade in the temple complex. Where did they get these stones to stone him? There weren't any stones there. I've read some commentaries that said it was still being constructed, so they may have run over to get these stones and so on. I think they brought the stones with them. I think they had figured out what they wanted to do to this guy. They knew what he was going to say. I think they brought the stones with them. Like, we were on tour once, and we set up on campus a stage real quick, and then we'd do our show when people got out of class. And it was an evangelistic show, and we had this angels and Satan, and it was this whole deal. But one time, one of the actors got egged. Now, where did those people had to have brought the eggs with them, right? They had planned to do this. Well, I think it's the same thing here. I think these people had the rocks prepared somewhere, hidden behind a pillar or something. I don't know what. Well, we're going to talk about that a bit more next week. But these verses in verses 27 to 30, they're really encouraging to me. And I think they are to you. It's because so often I wonder if all this is true. Is these miracles and all this promise of living forever, is it all true? And I guess it's because in this life, when you hear grandiose promises from people, you go like, okay, right. You look at it with some skepticism, right? Big promises, because they almost never come about. They're almost never true. Big, grandiose promises. Yet my heart's deepest yearning is to be in the presence of God. And I'm sure I'm talking to you folks too. The same thing. You know that it's there because you feel that you want to be in the presence of God and you love to be in the presence of God. Nobody can deny it. It's there. You feel it. You know it. I haven't found anything that satisfies that inner desire, that inner sense of the love of God, except Jesus. I know that voice of the shepherd. I know that voice. I feel that voice. I want to follow that voice. Same as you. I do what I can to follow that voice. So let's look again at what Jesus promised to me and to you as sheep. Let's look at it. It's encouraging. Do you remember what John said his purpose was in writing this gospel? He's going to say it actually in chapter 20, I believe it is. Yeah. Chapter 20, verses 30 to 31. He says why he wrote this gospel. He said, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples that aren't written in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the Son of God, and by believing, you may have life in his name. Did you see that promised life is not in the future tense? you may have life in his name. It's present tense. It's not future tense. You have eternal life now. If you believe in Jesus, you have eternal life now. You're living forever now. Jim, he plans on dying this year, 99 with a brain tumor. He's not going to die. His body's going to die. He's not going to die. What an encouragement. He's living forever now. And he knows it. That's the promise. But maybe you feel like Paul did in Romans 7. I do myself at times feel this way. I find myself sinning, and I don't seem to be able to do what I want to do. I want to be a holy person and live that kind of life. I want to be good. But I find myself doing things that I don't like, that I know aren't holy. So my fear, of course, is that this promise will be taken away from me, and I won't be living forever. And Paul answers his own question in the next chapter of Romans, Romans 8, where he says, "No condemnation now exists for those in Christ Jesus, because the Spirit's law of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and death." It doesn't affect you anymore. What the law could not do, since it was limited by the flesh, your body's drives move you this way and that way and willy-nilly, and you don't seem to have any control over it. I think alcoholics more than anybody know what I'm talking about here. Some things you just don't seem to have control over. The law was limited by the flesh. But what the law couldn't do, God did, Paul says. What did Jesus say? Not one, no one, nothing can snatch you out of his hand. And why can't anyone snatch you out of his hand? Because he and the Father are one. Jesus had just told the religious rulers and you and I where his power and authority come from. It's not just that Jesus and his Father have the same purpose. That's what the Jehovah's Witnesses say. They got the same purpose, like a human team. You're working together, so you're one. That's not what Jesus meant. No. Jesus claimed that he and the Father are two persons but one. He's claiming to be God. The promise of your eternal security is made by God Almighty, and no one can snatch you out of his hand. Now, the promise is only as good as the authority and power of the person giving the promise. And of course, you're talking about God here. So, who has more power than God? Can someone come along more powerful than God to snatch you out of his hand? How about the devil? Some people think of God and the devil sort of equal somehow. How about the devil? Can he accuse you to the point where you no longer have this promise from Jesus? Well, the devil's the one accusing you. That's what the word means, accuser. But the fact is, the devil was made by God. The devil's not bigger than God, not more powerful than God, nowhere near equal to God. That's what he wanted to be. That's why he fell. He's not more powerful. You can forget about the devil. Just forget about him and his accusations. They're not real. They're probably just memories, and memories don't mean anything anymore. They have no power over you. Forget about them. Focus on God, not on fear of the devil, or fear of yourself for that matter. Focus on God and his promises. How about you? Are you more powerful than God? Duh. Do you think that you can reverse the great transformation of you that God brought about when you accepted Christ? Can you reverse that? I don't know how. He says, no one is able to snatch you out of his hand. What does it mean? Only someone more powerful than God could do that. That's not us. In fact, do you think that the decision you made to follow Jesus came from you in the first place? No, you wanted to because the love of God was drawing you. It was from him from the beginning. You were given to Jesus by the Father, he says. You were chosen, even though it felt like you were deciding. You were chosen. No one can snatch you out of his hand. Don't worry about it. Live your life. You said you're a new creation in Christ. You said your life is hidden with Christ. Is it all just hot air? It's a great, precious promise. That's the most precious promise we have. I don't think God is lying to us. God is not a human that he should lie. No one can snatch you out of my hand, he said. What a great encouragement that is. We have life in his name. No one can snatch you away, never know how. So, let yourself be happy. All regrets come into your head, beating yourself up about this and about that. Set it aside. Let yourself be happy. You are living forever. Starting now. Well, starting some time ago for many of us. Let yourself be happy. Your shepherd will get you home. It's a promise of God. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Echoes of mercy. Whispers of love. Blessed assurance. Amen.